referring to your buyer, seller as your client, then you've created a single agent relationship, right? So if you're representing a seller, for example, and a buyer comes along, you show him the property, you can't start referring to both of them as your clients. Where does your allegiance lie, right? So there are customers, we're transaction brokers, right? Both of them are our customers. In the case that you represent the seller as a single agent instead of a transaction broker, then in fact he would be your client, right? If that's a single agent relationship was established somehow. A buyer comes, is interested, you give him a no brokerage relationship notice, okay? Let's say that buyer reads the no brokerage relationship notice and says, I'm not going for this. What should I do? Should I go up the road and find somebody who's going to represent my interest? I'm like, no, hold on. Let me talk to my seller. There's something called transaction broker. Would you be willing for me to represent both of you in a limited capacity? He says, sure. Now my single agent seller is signed up as a single agent. So in order to represent both of them in a limited capacity, I would have to get my seller to sign what's known as a transition to transaction broker notice. That one must always be signed. There is an example, there is a question on the state exam that has this same scenario, right? And then they say, who must sign what? And in this case, the only person that has to sign anything would be the seller. The seller has to sign the transition to transaction broker notice, right? And you can go back to that potential buyer and say, hey, I got him to transition, let's put it together, and not get anything signed and talk anything more. Why? Because it's presumed that we're transaction brokers in the state of Florida. You can just verbally communicate, I represent him now transaction, I can represent both of you in a limited capacity. So when you see that question on the state exam, make sure to just check seller only. Seller only has to sign, right? Dual agency is illegal. Dual agency would be if we were representing both the buyer and seller as our clients. Unfortunately, you see it all too often out in the field that that's what agents refer to as their buyers or sellers, clients. They're not.
Question. When the transition to transaction brokerage, that has to be signed when that actually happens. But if it's initially just a transaction, you can give it to the client.
You can give it to them to put them on notice, but you can just go about your business, right? Assuming you all can remember how this works, so you don't end up in FREC and tell them, I didn't know. Well, you didn't know, go back, take the class, $5,000 fine, all that good stuff, right? Where you're referring to both parties, you're representing both parties. It is presumed, really out there, as long as you stay away from using the word client, and you go about your business, and you don't work in the detriment of one to the benefit of the other, we're transaction broker. Many agents forget this because we don't need to whip these out and give them options. Back when I first got licensed in 01 through about 04, we used to have to give them the option to pick one of the three. That's not the case anymore. Okay? So let's go back to the scenario that I gave you. You give this guy the no brokerage relationship notice. He doesn't object to it. He's like, fine. You show him the property. After viewing the property, he tells you, I'm interested. My mom lives 2 houses down. I want this house. You're asking $500,000. I want to offer $470,000, but I'm willing to pay the $500,000. Please don't sell it to anybody else. What are you going to go back and tell your single agent seller? That he's offering $470,000?
Yeah.
And that?
You're not going to mention the 5.
Yeah, you are.
Oh, you are.
He's no brokerage. He's no brokerage. You don't represent his interest. Now, in the case of where you transition, you're representing both of them on a transaction broker capacity, then you keep them up. But in this case, he was good with the fact that you gave him a no brokerage relationship. Your loyalty lies with your seller in this case. then you would.
Wouldn't you have to put in the offer for the 470 he offered?
Sure, I'm gonna go back to my seller and say, here's the $470,000 offer. By the way, his mom lives 2 houses down. He told me he wants the property no matter what, and said he'd pay full price. So, you wanna counter at full price? I suggest we do. Right? Now, if your seller transitioned to transaction, and you're representing both of them in a transaction broker capacity, and he tells you this, you go back to your single agent seller and you tell your single agent seller he's offering 470. And that's where the conversation pretty much ends. If your seller says, what do you think? I would probably say, for example, well, you know, when we met and we ran the comparables, and this still seems to be the case, they're selling for about 485. What do you want to do? And in that case, you can guide each party with your knowledge, facts, etc. But you don't go back because you stand to make, let's say, as an example, because commissions are not set, you plan to make another $30,000, another 6% on $30,000. You're not going to go back and tell them the other person's bottom line, right? In a transaction broker relationship, you work for a common goal of getting the transaction done, not to the benefit of one or detriment of the other. It's all too unfortunate that in the real world, most people have their allegiance lie with the seller, because the seller's the one that's indirectly or directly paying the commission, even though the buyer really is indirectly paying it as well. Okay? Any questions on those? Gave you a lot of this chapter in my own words, so let's just kind of go through it. Again, these disclosures are for residential resales, okay? New construction does not apply. Look out for leases on the state exam, they don't apply here. The lease of a condominium, you would not have to establish any of these relationships. Again, I gave you a lot of this in my own words. You guys not asking questions today? Any questions? Was that explanation sufficient? I'm gonna go with it. I'm doing a phenomenal job. And that's why nobody has any questions. Good.
He had mentioned when he began at first talk about a scenario, selling the house, and for 70,000. Kind of lost me there. Somebody over there was asking about the 5,000.
5,000.
Yeah, somebody over there said, what happened? Maybe tell him about the 5,000.
Okay,
Oh,
so
the
what?
$5,000 fine, right?
No.
Oh, yeah, when I said $5,000 fine, I was like, if you go, you're representing both buyer and seller, and you're referring to them as your clients, they get confused, they think that you're representing their interest. FREC can fine you up to $5,000 per count.
Oh, that's
So-
what the 5,000.
Yeah, that's where that came in, thank you.
Yeah.
So sub-agents, this again pops up on the state exam. You know, I know this information off the top of my head, so I'll just go kind of all over the place, but I stick to at least the common chapter, I won't really jump into others. Alright, so duties of a single agent. You wanna know which ones are duties of just a single agent. And in this case, COLD would be an acronym to help you remember the 4 duties that are just part of single agency. And that is confidentiality, obedience, loyalty, and disclosure in full. So that would be COLD. Now, duties in a no brokerage relationship, and there's a part here that pops up on the state exam, right? So ADD is part of no brokerage relationship. But ADD is also in all of the 3 of them, okay? So for all of your relationships, no matter whether it's single agent, no brokerage, or transaction brokerage, you must account for all funds, deal honestly and fairly, and the one that's really on the state exam is disclose all known facts that materially affect the value of residential property that are not readily observable to the buyer. okay? So for example, you know the roof is shot, but they painted it with kills, it's the non-rainy season, you know you must disclose even if you do not represent that party, okay? What else would be a material fact? They're extending the railroad to run right behind the house. They're not gonna start it till next year. It's a material fact that you know is gonna take place, you must disclose that.
And if you don't, what's the penalty?
It would be it would be a violation of 475, second degree misdemeanor, 60 days, $500. If it's not, if there's a victim or potential victim, right? And it's not the four that we talked about, the rental list, unlicensed activity, falsifying an application, or theft of a state exam is gonna be a second degree misdemeanor. Now, I think the problem there is not gonna lie so much with 60 days or $500. FREC also has the right to hit you with administrative penalties, $5,000. But I think you're gonna get civilly sued too, you know, for damages.
What if you don't know but should have known?
Well,
I mean, is there an intent requirement, or is there,
if you don't know, you can't disclose.
well, for example, the railroad expansion,
Uh-huh.
that's,
If you didn't attend the commissioners meeting when they passed that they were gonna do this, I mean, you should have done your due diligence, for example, but if you don't know, you can't disclose. There's an inspection period. They have the right to find this out all throughout the transaction, but if you don't know, for example, if you don't know that your seller painted the ceiling with kills, you're not a home inspector, we're not supposed to get up on the roof, check to see if it's shot or not.
But
So there's
isn't
no-
there a, like,
there's no
Sorry.
common knowledge.
Yeah, cause in law, not knowing is not sufficient defense.
Okay, well, facts would be sufficient, so disclose all known facts, right? That's within the wording right there. We're not home inspectors, we're not expected to be in the inner circles of the politicians in the area, know that this is gonna come up, but if you know, you best disclose.
but how about in the case where it's what he said, like, you didn't know, but you should have known, isn't there a negligence?
Culpable negligence, right?
There you go.
So culpable negligence would be knowing a material fact and not disclosing the material fact. You should have known to disclose it because you knew it. But culpable negligence, we're not, again, supposed to be home inspectors, we're not getting licensed in home inspection. If you don't know that they had this meeting, that they're gonna be running a railroad track, how are you supposed to, we're not supposed to go attend every, you know, zoning change meeting or anything along those lines. Giving an opinion to title, and you forgot, right? So, if a buyer asks you, is the title good on the property? Yeah, it's good. And I hear agents do this all the time. And then you're getting a complaint filed against you, and you go in front of FREC, he says, well, I didn't know I couldn't give an opinion to title. Culpable negligence.
Is there any fine with culpable negligence, like a?
Yeah, culpable negligence is what you kind of stated, just because you forgot the law, they're gonna reference, well, didn't you pass the 63 hours, right? You should have known, maybe that was just the one thing you forgot from the class. So that would be culpable negligence, it's not an excuse to not know, right?
And what's the penalty for that?
Misdemeanor, probably.
If you forgot that you couldn't, okay, so if you forgot, right, that a sales associate can't operate his own business, then you're being charged with a third-degree felony there because of culpable negligence.
So
Right.
culpable negligence is a third-degree felony.
No. Culpable negligence can be a third-degree felony, can be a first-degree misdemeanor, can be a second-degree misdemeanor, can be an administrative fine. I didn't know I had to change my address within 10 days. Culpable negligence.
Oh.
Culpable negligence is just using the defense that I didn't know when you should have known. That's all culpable negligence is.
Okay.
And the reality of the matter is most of you are gonna